The Dominic Raab bullying report is handed to the Prime Minister. The investigation into the Deputy Prime Minister has taken 5 months. It's now being carefully considered by Rishi Sunak, who says this lunchtime he still has full confidence in his number 2. Also ahead, will the government ignore European law over its small boats migrants policy? We'll have the latest. A private funeral for a public favourite. The village Paul O'Grady called home for 20 years lines the streets to say goodbye to the TV star and star campaigner.
He's a really nice man to us. He was kind, generous, and used to love animals as well.
Well, he was just such a lovely man, and I've met
sort of our neighbour.
And a mind-blowing minute, how stargazers describe seeing a rare total solar eclipse in Australia.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. Is the Deputy Prime Minister a bully? Not long now until we find out. 5 months after an investigation into allegations of workplace bullying by Dominic Raab began, the Prime Minister now has the report and is said to be carefully considering its findings. Rishi Sunak also said once again he has full confidence in Mr Raab. Mr Raab himself denies all the allegations and has said previously he'll resign if he's found guilty. It's reported some civil servants could quit if he's not. Our political reporter Amy Lewis has the latest.
For months, questions about his conduct have followed Dominic Raab's every step.
Have you always behaved professionally, Mr Raab?
As he was investigated into whether he bullied and belittled staff.
Any regrets, Mr Raab?
But now the independent report is finally in the Prime Minister's hands, as is his deputy's fate. Bullying allegations first emerged publicly in November after Mr Raab was reappointed Justice Secretary. We understand the inquiry was investigating 8 formal complaints, which involved at least 24 civil servants. He has consistently denied bullying, something he repeated recently while standing in at Prime Minister's questions.
Does he think more bullies will be brought to justice?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can reassure the House I've never called anyone scum.
Will he walk before he's pushed?
Madam Deputy Speaker, one thing never changes. She always comes with the usual bluster and political opportunism.
The inquiry by Adam Tolley KC started almost 5 months ago. During that time, Mr Raab has continued in his position. One former minister says that should never have happened.
I actually think there's a fundamental rethink required about how we deal with these sorts of allegations, both in government, made against ministers, and made against members of parliament. It's a massively outdated system that isn't what our constituents would expect of any of us.
Labour told me there are still plenty of unanswered questions surrounding this investigation.
I think Rishi Sunak should have taken action on this much earlier. I think there are serious questions about what he knew.
Allies of Dominic Raab have always maintained that he is a professional minister with high standards and not a bully. But he has said previously that if the claims are upheld, he would resign. But that could be out of his control as his boss, the Prime Minister, digests the report this lunchtime. Well, today, the Prime Minister's spokesperson first of all confirmed that the Prime Minister was handed the report this morning and that he now will be considering that carefully. Now, the Prime Minister's spokesperson also confirmed that as it stands, Dominic Raab does remain in his position and has the full confidence of the Prime Minister. Of course, don't forget that Dominic Raab is a key ally of Rishi Sunak's. He is not just the Minister for Justice, but he is also the Deputy Prime Minister. Now, when Downing Street was asked today around timescales of when there will be some kind of announcement, the Prime Minister's spokesperson said that the Prime Minister will be considering the report carefully and they wouldn't be drawn on timescales. But previously, Downing Street has said that they do expect to make a swift announcement after the Prime Minister has received the report. So therefore, Nina, it could be an eventful afternoon here in Westminster.
Amy Lewis, thank you. Last year, a shocking review into the treatment of disabled children in UK care homes discovered more than 100 young people had been abused at 3 private homes in Doncaster. It found children had been punched, kicked, taunted and subjected to inappropriate restraint. Today, the government's child safeguarding advisors have recommended reforms to ensure it never happens again. Faye Barker joins me now. What are the recommendations and, crucially, will they work?
Well, now there are calls for a more joined-up approach for the care of disabled children to avoid this kind of abuse happening again. The report you mentioned there, it had described a culture of abuse and harm at 3 places: Fullerton House, Willsick Hall and Wheatley House, all in Doncaster, South Yorkshire. It happened between 2018 and 2021. They were all run by the Hesley Group, who has closed them down and has since apologised, and a police investigation into what happened there continues. So to today now, we've had these recommendations. They're all aimed at preventing the abuse of disabled children. So they include joint inspections by Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission of these residential settings. Also a need for staff to undergo urgent training, including issues relating to the appropriate use of physical restraints. Also, it's recommended children should be placed in homes closer to their families. So here's more on this from Dr. Susan Tranter. She was part of the Safeguarding Review panel.
What this change in direction will mean is that children will have their voice. They will be able to say what they want and how they feel about the provision that is made for them. Parents will have the assurance that their children are safe and in an environment where they are able to thrive. And those people, the professional bodies who are charged with commissioning and ensuring that children are safe, will have the assurance that there is a robust framework and that the judgments made are ones that they can rely on.
So are the changes enough?
Well, the charity MENCAP told us today it is urgent that these recommendations are acted on immediately.
Well, the report's authors have given the government 6 months to respond to their vital recommendations. It should be 6 weeks. At the end of the day, the change that's needed is urgent, and the government needs to put this at the top of its list of priorities and act with urgency. We do not want to be here in a year or 2 years' time when another abuse scandal has been uncovered and more children and young people and their families are left permanently traumatised by the appalling experiences they've been through.
So now we do have, it seems, agreement across the board that any changes need to be put into action to ensure that these disabled children and their families get the care that they deserve.
Faye Barker, thank you very much. Thank you. The Royal Medical Colleges have urged the government and unions to call in the ACAS Conciliation Service to help end the stalemate. It's to avoid what could be catastrophic strikes. The strikes are part of a dispute over pay and patient safety and follows action last month. The scandal-hit Confederation of British Industry has passed new information to the police regarding a report of a serious criminal offence. The CBI represents 190,000 businesses across the UK. Its former boss, Tony Danker, was sacked earlier this month and 3 other people are suspended. Dozens of people were killed and injured in a stampede in Yemen's capital, Sana'a, late on Wednesday. It happened after crowds panicked by the sound of gunfire and an electrical explosion. The crush took place in the old city where hundreds of people had gathered for a charity event. In March, Rishi Sunak's government announced a new law which would bar anyone who arrived in a small boat from claiming asylum and see them deported back to their homeland or a third country. This has seen backlash from the European Convention on Human Rights. Now the government appears to have made concessions with Conservative Party rebels over the illegal migration bill by reportedly agreeing to allow ministers to ignore the European judges in certain situations. Chloe Keedy is in Westminster. Chloe, what more can you tell us?
Well, Nina, this bill's already caused a lot of controversy. Rishi Sunak made stopping the boats one of his top political priorities. He is desperate for this legislation to go through. He doesn't want to risk any rebellion, to the extent that it's now emerged he has been working behind the scenes with those right-wing rebels to essentially reword the bill so that it gives the Home Secretary the power to potentially ignore European laws on human rights. Now, as it stands, there's something called a Section 39 order, which is essentially an injunction from the European Court. They were used last summer to stop planes carrying illegal migrants to Rwanda. But under this amendment, the government wouldn't automatically have to accept those rulings, and in fact it could choose to deport people while it's waiting for a final decision from the European Court. While the MP Simon Clarke was one of those right-wing rebels, and this is what he had to say about it.
I think the public are absolutely fed up with us being unable to control our borders. That is, I'm afraid, effectively where we've reached. While seeking to make sure, in essence, that the Home Secretary can deliver on what the bill sets out to do, and that we aren't frustrated in the courts by what has become, I'm afraid, a really pernicious example of judicial overreach and the human rights creep which has enabled this problem to become so serious.
But there are some others who feel that this is an extremely worrying moment, including some in the Lords, where this bill will eventually end up. They feel it's a worrying moment because of the precedent it sets and because of the implications it could have for other areas of law, this idea that the government can simply ignore the bits it doesn't like.
Chloe Keedy, thank you. Next, a murder trial started today more than 30 years after a 7-year-old girl was lured to her death. Nikki Allen was killed near her home in Sunderland in a violent attack in October 1992. The man accused of killing her was 25 at the time. Our reporter Kelly Foran is at Newcastle Crown Court. What did the court hear this morning?
Well, the court heard about this historic unsolved murder. It's a case about a 7-year-old girl, Nikki Allen, who one night more than 30 years ago vanished when she was walking across a courtyard of apartments from where her grandparents lived to where she lived. She was brutally murdered. She was hit with a brick, and the 7-year-old was stabbed 37 times. Now, since that evening in 1992, this is a murder that has remained unsolved. The killer's identity, a mystery. Today, here at Newcastle Crown Court, 55-year-old David Boyd sat in the dock as the prosecution claim he is the man that murdered the little girl. The police recently reinvestigated the case and they found his DNA on items of her clothing in a couple of different places. They say it's not just that though. They told the jury he lived on the same floor in that apartment block as her grandparents, and that his girlfriend at the time was in fact Nikki's babysitter. Now, lots has changed in all those years in terms of policing, in terms of DNA testing, but the one thing that has remained the same here is that nobody has ever been brought to justice for Nikki's murder. It's been a long time coming for the family. Her mother left the courtroom this morning in tears before the prosecution even began their opening statement. David Boyd sat staring straight ahead all morning. He denies the murder.
Kelly Foran, thank you very much. Thank you. A private funeral for one of the best-known, loved and respected public figures, Paul O'Grady, is about to begin in Kent. The comedian, presenter and star campaigner died last month. Born in Birkenhead, he lived his last 20 years in a small village in Kent that has become today the focal point for a celebration of his life amid the sadness surrounding his sudden death. Charlie Frost has the details.
From his drag alter ego, Lily Savage.
Well, good evening and welcome to my little show. I'm not drunk, it's these mules that are death trapped.
To sharing his love of dogs, Paul O'Grady's distinctive Merseyside twang graced our televisions for more than 3 decades. But for the last 20 years, it was a small village in Kent that he called home, and it's here he will be laid to rest.
He was a really nice man to us. He was kind, generous, and used to love animals as well.
He's done so much for this school and he had time for everyone.
I saw him down the village shop once and he had a few dogs with him, and he was a very kind person. He's really good because he's rescued so many dogs and from the Battersea and things like that, and I think we need a lot more people like him.
Regularly seen in the village shop or popping into the pub, he was as affectionate about Aldington and its people as they were about him. And whilst the ceremony is private, his husband Andre Portasio posted in local Facebook groups, encouraging villagers to line the street to the church.
I loved him as Lily Savage. You know, we used to sit at home and watch his shows and kill ourselves laughing. And we even rung up one time when he had a phone in and said, "Can you stop Buster weeing up our fence?" You know.
The funeral will include a guard of honour from Battersea Dogs Home, a charity he raised millions for. A fitting nod to the show that came to define him.
When I retire, I'm going to sort of be like a little mini Battersea down in Kent.
And while celebrities are expected to be amongst the mourners, this is also the village's chance to say their goodbye to the friend, neighbour and entertainer who was so loved by the nation. Charlie Frost, ITV News.
Our reporter Lucy Watson is there. So fitting, Lucy, that dogs are forming a guard of honour at Paul O'Grady's funeral.
Yes, Nina, quite right. Now, Paul O'Grady's friends have said that whatever happens today, his funeral will be a celebration of his life full of laughter. And Paul himself said he couldn't bear the idea of anyone being morose. He wanted people to have a good time, and that might be why outside the village pub there is plenty of bunting, and the WI have been serving drinks and food all morning. This is the village that he has spent the last 2 decades of his life. Now, the procession is expected to come up this road behind me. We are expecting a horse and carriage. It will then, at the village pub, it will turn the corner and head down the hill to a very small church for a private funeral service. He was very much part of village life in this community. We went into the primary school this morning and children were saying to me, "Oh, we used to see him in the pub, we used to see him in the post office posting letters." And one little girl said, "You know, despite him being so famous, he used to do that job himself." And their head teacher said he was just like he was on the television. He would light up a room and you never ever wanted him to go. Everyone here will get the chance today in this celebration of this procession to celebrate his life, because everyone felt some kind of affinity with him.
Lucy Watson, some lovely detail there. Thank you very much. Thank you. Sarah Ferguson has spoken about why she isn't attending the King's coronation next month. The Duchess of York said she can't have it both ways after getting divorced from Prince Andrew. Lizzie Robinson was watching the interview on Good Morning Britain and joins me now. What exactly did she say then?
So, Nina, while 2,000 guests have been invited to Westminster Abbey for the coronation ceremony, now just over 2 weeks away, it has been confirmed that Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, will not be among them. Despite being married to Prince Andrew once, the couple split up in 1992, and while she remains close to him and to members of the royal family, she acknowledged this morning in an interview that she is divorced and therefore can't have 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
You're not going to the coronation, are you?
No, I'm not, actually, because it's a state occasion.
Right.
And being divorced, I don't think you can have it both ways. The great thing about this moment in time is the unity of family. I think that Charles and Camilla are doing an exceptional job at unifying the family.
So Fergie's not going. What about Andrew? Do we know whether he will be attending yet?
Well, nothing officially confirmed yet from Buckingham Palace, but while I think he will be there on the day, he is the King's brother after all, I don't think he'll play any kind of formal role. And by that I mean I don't think he'll take part in the procession or appear on the balcony. I think they'll keep that to working members of the royal family only. But for Sarah, who has always remained fiercely loyal to Andrew, she actually said in the interview today that having the spotlight taken off him would perhaps be a good thing now.
With Prince Andrew, he's such a good man. He's a kind, good man. And I think the spotlight needs to come off him and let him get on with his life to rebuild.
And she says that she wants that not just for his sake, but for the sake of his children and for his grandchildren.
Lizzie Robinson, thank you very much. Thank you. Finally, this lunchtime, the remote tourist town in Australia that was the best place in the world to see a rare total solar eclipse. Exmouth is home to around 3,000 people, but 20,000 headed there to see it briefly plunge into midday darkness. The international crowd of dedicated eclipse chasers had been gathering for days waiting for the spectacular sight that lasted just a minute. Aisha Tull has the details.
Gazing up with a mixture of excitement, wonder and delight for an astrological phenomenon that only happens a few times in a century. This is a total solar eclipse. The moon, the sun and the earth in alignment. The best view on the planet? Exmouth in Western Australia, a seaside town over 700 miles north of Perth, which normally has a population of 3,000. That went up sevenfold as tens of thousands of stargazers and scientists watched side by side to look up at the skies.
It's this amazing, dare I say, universal thing. People are interested in the stars and the universe, and this spectacular event of the moon moving in front of the sun to cause an eclipse just really stirs something in the human psyche, and people want to be a part of it.
Even the ex-astronaut Tim Peake got involved, experiencing the surreal moment in Exmouth when the sky went dark.
Everything goes very, very quiet. Birds go down to roost, and it's very spooky. It's very eerie. I mean, everybody has a different reaction. Some people were getting very emotional, very spiritual. People were hugging, people were crying. It's an incredible experience.
And one that seemed to thrill kids and adults alike.
It's only a minute long, but it really felt like a long time because it was like you could see it and it was just beautiful. And there's nothing else you can see which looks like that.
It's really exciting. You just need to use these glasses because when you look at the sun with your own eyes, they can damage them.
Celestial events like this only happen about once every decade, so the next time we're likely to see this again will be 2031. Aisha Tull, ITV News.
We can't wait. That's it this lunchtime. Mary is here with the ITV Evening News at 6:30 from everyone here for now. Bye-bye.